Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today we are going to unpack the dense, highly strategic, and just utterly fascinating mechanics of a truly high-stakes lit RPG trial. I mean, if you love deep magic systems that blend intense survival tactics with massive sweeping celestial lore, you are absolutely in for a treat today. We're going to be looking at a scenario where players aren't just, fighting monsters with swords. They are literally weaving fate, rewriting game parameters, and manipulating actual constellations to outsmart a trap of mutually assured destruction. It's a lot to wrap our heads around, so let's just get right into it.
Okay, so here's our quick roadmap for today's explainer. We'll be covering the Basilisk's deadly jinx, then the legendary cross stance, moving on to crafting a living chainmail, and finally wrapping up with the cosmic battle unveiled. All right, let's jump right into part one, the Basilisk's deadly jinx. So, our journey starts right after the operators and assignments level. The characters have just established their family principles and clan-based logic, and they're probably feeling pretty good about themselves. But then, their celebration is completely cut short by this incredibly bizarre prompt from their quote-unquote dad. He tells them, transform sheet into a mothership via transmutation. I mean, what does that even mean, right? It totally sets the stage for everything that follows. To even comprehend this wild alchemical riddle, the players are told they need the eyes of a child but the heart of a father. And the prerequisites, just to survive this level, they are insane. We're talking about nullifying venom in Cancer and Scorpio, gaining immunity in Aquarius, and securing an NPC village in Gemini. Now, you might be wondering why all this insane preparation. Well, it's because they are walking into a truly diabolical trap. And that brings us to the immediate stakes of the game, which is the Basilisk's jinx itself. This wicked trap forces an impossible choice modeled directly after the Garden of Eden. It's the ultimate lose-lose situation. Think about it. Will Adam sacrifice Eve, or will Eve sacrifice Adam? If the husband evades the attack, the wife dies. If she evades, he dies. Mutually assured destruction. So to survive this, dodging simply isn't an option. You can't just jump out of the way. Instead, the players have to use a legendary fusion jutsu called mutual trust. By sharing a single proverbial body through this absolute trust, if one of them is an immortal, the other basically inherits that immunity by integration. But here is the wild irony of the whole thing. To avoid the jinx, they actually have to risk taking the fatal hit together. They have to run directly into the danger. Moving right along to part two, the legendary cross stance. So practically speaking, how do they defend against a monster that is specifically targeting two distinct roles? Well, Kieran and Concordia start by decoding the metaphorical meaning behind their targets. It's like a giant puzzle. They figure out that the basilisk is hunting two specific entities. First up, you have Aries the ram, representing the husband, the head of the house who protects the family's shelter. And obviously, if the shelter falls, everyone inside is vulnerable. Second, you have Virgo the virgin, representing the wife, the mothership who defends the bloodline itself. If she falls, future generations are just annihilated. Because the basilisk is hunting both of these targets at the same time, Kieran realizes they have to perform a substitution jutsu known as the cross stance. In this incredibly brilliant tactical swap, Aries becomes the mothership and Virgo becomes the ram. By reversing their roles, they completely scramble the basilisk's targeting system while managing to protect both the shelter and the bloodline simultaneously. It's a real game changer. But of course, there's a deeper layer to this strategy. How do you effectively bait a monster looking for these specific targets when your own identities are so fluid? Kieran points out a fascinating detail. Concordia's sigil is the Kraken Andromeda, which is this crazy mix of a sea ruler and a Greek princess. Meanwhile, San wields the Tome of 13 Rules and inherits a legendary archery skill. So, the question is, who is who? Either of them could be Aries. Either could be Virgo, or they could be both. Actually, scratch that, they could be neither. This intentional ambiguity becomes their absolute greatest weapon against villains like Xanfar and his minions. See, enemies like that interpret everything in rigid black and white extremes. If it's not white, it simply must be black. So to counter an enemy that only sees the world in black and white, the players deploy what they call the null set. They use a brilliant tactic known as the Pyrostellus Luminaris formation. You can kind of think of it as mixing union, intersection, and disjoint sets to create a true null set. Every wise dreamweaver knows that white light can be diffracted into multiple spectrums, and conversely, fusing all colors creates pitch black. The elements they are working with interact circularly, not linearly. By utilizing temperature adjustment parameters, basically meticulously balancing hot and cold to create a comfortable ambient stealth, they create absolute camouflage. This completely blinds the basilisk. They don't just hide behind a rock, they literally become entirely untargetable by manipulating the very spectrum of light and temperature. All right, that brings us to part 3, crafting a living chainmail. Having solved the crazy alchemical riddle of how to blend in, the players now have to move to the next phase of survival. According to the Abraham Mother's Law's needs theorem, having secured their shelter and their food, they absolutely must now acquire clothes. But as you can probably guess, they aren't just designing high fashion here, they are crafting hardcore survival gear. Over in the knowledgeable White Liger Peristilium, Arlene and Mitsuki take agriculture to an entirely sci-fi level. They literally instruct researchers to study root, stem, and leaf systems to deeply fundamentally understand photosynthesis. The secret here is preserving the living cells that have been severed from trees. By harnessing sunlight or proteins found in other organisms, these cells can actually trigger regeneration. They then take these living cells and integrate them into a super durable mesh-like fabric. This conducting fabric is shielded by insulating layers, which creates clothing that actually absorbs physical shock and uses muscle contractions to self-repair. It's essentially the agricultural method of grafting applied directly to combat armor. Meanwhile, Chiron turns his researchers into master weavers by assigning the Leo system to farmers, telling them to seek out cloth-producing plants like cotton and flax. And this clothing is far more than just protection. It's actually a powerful sigil. Each faction heavily customizes their gear, infusing the very threads with their own distinct elements and emotions. If you look at how it breaks down, Ariel and Saito infuse blaze and flame into their fabric. This grants them absolute immunity to stat debuffs and provides a massive fortitude buff that amplifies their attacks. On the other hand, Kirin and Concordia integrate multiple elemental shields into theirs, granting absolute stealth, adaptability, and elemental damage immunity. In the ancient world, threads symbolized both lives and fates. So by connecting this living thread, they are quite literally connecting their fates together to perfectly counter their ultimate enemy, the Weaver of Calamity. And finally, we hit part 4, the cosmic battle unveiled. With the physical game mechanics finally conquered, we enter the last and arguably most expansive phase of our explainer. This is where the scale just blows your mind. Concordia gathers her archers and pulls back the curtain, revealing the true mythological and cosmic scale of the trials they've just survived. She maps out the night sky to explain what is really happening behind the scenes. First, if you look at the northern sky, there's a constellation resembling a serpentine dragon. These are the 7 seraphic stars, which represent divine entities that guard clans and nations down on Earth. Then you have the 2 pole stars, like Polaris up in the north and the Southern Cross down in the south, which represent major principalities battling to decide an entire nation's fate. The Aries and Leo constellations represent the eternal nation, Aries acting as the vulnerable young lamb, but carrying the demeanor of Leo, the destined true king. Virgo, as we talked about, is the fierce motherly guardian shielding this burgeoning kingdom. And that basilisk they fought earlier, that wasn't just a monster. That was a reflection of the usurper, the ancient serpent, the assassin of destiny. These characters aren't just fighting a random boss at the end of a dungeon. They are undergoing orchestrated cosmic attacks designed to assassinate their nation's dreams, its ambitions, and its very conception before they can even be born. And that brings us to the ultimate realization of this entire explainer. The players survived a trap of mutually assured destruction, not by fighting with brute force, but by completely shifting their identities, crafting literal armor from living trust, and deeply understanding the celestial mechanics governing their world. As you process all of this dense lore and strategy, I want you to consider this final thought. If our destiny is written in the stars, is the ultimate camouflage learning to rewrite our own constellation? These characters survived not by rejecting their fate, but by taking control and weaving their own thread right into the fabric of the cosmos itself. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope you leave today with a whole new appreciation for how deep and meaningful these systems can truly go.